Hey, how's the sound? It works. Good. I want everybody, we want to do what we can to make sure everybody can hear. And so if you aren't hearing, don't hesitate to raise your hand. I don't mind repeating something if you feel you've missed it. Let us join in prayer. Gather us now, O God, in your presence. Make your word a lively word that speaks to the truth of our lives with the truth of the good news of Jesus Christ. May the words of my mouth and the meditations of all our hearts be acceptable in your sight, O Lord, our strength and our Redeemer. Amen. After I sent the draft of this week's order of worship to Luke, who was preparing it for the printer, he sent me a note back and said, "Is this the right reading?" It's a good question. Why are we having a reading about the crucifixion of Christ now? It's not Holy Week, not even Lent. If this Sunday has some particular significance, it's probably as the Sunday before the American Thanksgiving. But it is also for the church, for us, the final Sunday of the church year, which is known as Christ the King Sunday. Our year ends with a shout of acclamation, a declaration: Jesus Christ is our King. Next Sunday will be a new year. No fireworks, but an Advent wreath, for it will be the first Sunday of Advent. Before long, we will be singing, "What Child Is This?" But today, we're asking, what King is this? We ask, what kind of king is King Jesus? What kind of Lord, what kind of God is he? Now remember that Rome's Caesar was considered to be divine, to be God. And the citizens of Rome were expected to acclaim their allegiance by saying, "Caesar is Lord." The Christians got in trouble because they wouldn't say that. They said Christ is Lord, and every time they did, the implication was Caesar is not Lord. What kind of king, what kind of Lord is he? Many, perhaps most rulers, use their power to enhance and to protect themselves. Power is self-aggrandizing. The powerful compete ruthlessly for power and retaliate against their enemies. As Jesus said, you know that among the Gentiles, Those whom they recognized as rulers lord it over them, and their great ones are tyrants over them. But it is not to be so among you. Whoever wishes to be great among you must be a servant of all. So in our lesson for Christ the King Sunday, Jesus hangs upon the cross. And as he did so, he was taunted and he was mocked 3 times. First, leaders, presumably religious and political leaders, scoffed, "He saved others. Let him save himself if he is the Messiah." It's so cruel, so smug. And do you hear how the leaders define power? It was the power to protect yourself. Second, the soldiers who had divided what must not have been very much in the way of clothing among themselves said derisively, "You're the Messiah. Save yourself and us." And finally, one of the 2 criminals crucified alongside him called out, "Are you not the Messiah? Well then, save us. If you're the king, prove it. Time for a power play." You recall that Jesus, as he began his ministry, was tested 3 times by Satan. Each an invitation to use his power to bring glory to himself. Now at the end, 3 more times, he is tested to misuse his power. Don't you get it, Jesus? The point of power is to protect yourself. That's how the world understands power. That's how the autocrats, the so-called strong men across the globe today understand power. That's how Vladimir Putin understands power. And that's how some Christians now understand power. They would have us believe that Jesus today would be carrying his own AR-15. Jesus is not that kind of king. His crown is a crown of thorns. His throne is a cross. He does not lord it over others. He submits to God's will. He shares our human vulnerability rather than pretending to have invulnerability. He gave himself to us and for us to save us, to wipe out a debt we could not pay for ourselves. The enormity of that debt is on display in this story. Leaders, soldiers, criminals, all alike. We may think we would never say such things, that we would never use power to enhance and protect ourselves. Are we so sure? The world's kings and rulers make never-ending demands upon their followers. Be more loyal to me. Give me more. Work harder for me. Work faster for me. Whether it's Pharaoh in Egypt or Putin in Moscow or likes on Facebook and Instagram, These demand ever more of us. It's never enough. You are never enough. In Christ the King, God gives himself. This King offers grace, his one-way love for our cruelty, indifference, our self-satisfaction. He joins, hangs with the broken, the lost, those who are at the end of their rope. He gives hope to the hopeless, mercy to the broken, and rest to the weary. Come to me, all you who labor and are overburdened, and I will give you rest for your souls. Take my yoke upon you, for my burden is light, and you will have rest. And yet sometimes we preachers and we church sound like the world's harsh and demanding kings and rulers. We sound like rulers lording it over others, and not like the one who said, I will give you rest. We preach law, not grace. Demand, not mercy. Desmond Tutu, the great Archbishop of South Africa, once said something that has helped me a great deal. He said, Christianity is not a religion of virtue. People think it is, but it is not. It is a religion of grace. What's the difference? A religion of virtue, Tutu said, says to people, if you are good, then God will love you. Many of us have heard such a message from preachers. I preach such a message. Many have heard such a message from our parents. And some of us hear such a message in our internal dialogue, our words to ourselves. If you're good enough, you'll be loved. The coin has another side. If people knew the truth about you, they'd know no one could really love you. Christianity, said Tutu, is not a religion of virtue or achievement. It is a religion of grace. A religion of grace says, I love you. I forgive you. I am for you. And there's nothing you can do to deserve my love, and there's nothing you can do to undo my love. I delight in you. Just the other day, I heard a man who was talking about his father, a man whom he acknowledged had many imperfections. But he said, whenever my father introduced me to one of his friends, he would put his arm around me and he would say, this is my beloved son, with whom I am well pleased. The very same words that spoke forth from the heavens when Jesus was baptized. What a gift. What a gift to that boy. Craig Parton is an attorney who serves as the United States Director of the International Academy of Human Rights. He's written a book that's called The Defense Never Rests, A Lawyer's Quest for the Gospel. A Lawyer's Quest for the Gospel. In it, he describes his journey from an unexamined atheism to faith in Christ. His conversion, he says, was all about grace. God's one-way love and mercy for him. But not long after converting to Christianity, Parton says he was dismayed to discover how much of modern American Christianity isn't about grace. It's a treadmill of personal self-improvement, striving to fulfill laws and rules, or a roller coaster ride, chasing one spiritual high after another, seeking always never satisfied. He writes, I experience what happens when the law and the gospel are not understood and thus distinguished. My Christian life, which truly had begun by grace, was now being perfected on the treadmill of the law. My pastors told me to yield more, to pray more, to give more, to care about unbelievers more, to read the Bible more, to get involved with the church more, to love my wife more, to love my kids more. Years passed before I understood that my Christian life had come to center not on Christ, but on me. On my life, my obedience, my yielding, my Bible verse memorization, my prayers, my zeal, my witnessing, and my sermon application. Something, he writes, had changed. God was a father, all right, but a painfully demanding one. For part in the fruit ultimately born in his life of these so-called gospel messages was exhaustion and weariness. A to-do list Christianity and self-improvement spirituality had burned him out. It left him hating himself for the ways that he fell short and the times that he relapsed. It made him critical and self-righteous toward others whose discipleship did not measure up to his own. As a result, he was less content and more unkind to others after he had become a Christian than before. Pardon's preachers and church had, perhaps with good intentions, replaced a religion of grace with a religion of virtue, replaced the gospel with the law, and the demands never let up. Pardon beat up on himself for failing to achieve some sort of perfection. There's another side, too, to this way that Christianity gets turned into a demanding religion of law and achievement. I think it encourages us to pretend to a perfection we don't possess. We pretend to have it all together. We need no grace, no Jesus. I got this. A young pastor friend of mine noticed that a member of his congregation had not been in church for several weeks, and so he sent a note to her saying that he had missed her and wondered if she was okay. She wrote a note back to him saying, "Dear Jason, thank you for your kind note. You're right, I've not been to church in over a month. There's no reason for my absence other than to say that I simply could not do it anymore. I felt like for my own good I had to stay away." Some background, she added, might help. After my son graduated from high school, we discovered he'd been abused for years by someone close to him, close to our family. It tore us apart. My son lashed out with anger and alcohol. I blamed myself for not knowing, not seeing it, not being able to stop it. I nursed my own guilt with alcohol and pills. With a lot of help, he's healing slowly, putting his life back together. When he was a boy, he was so happy. I could easily have shot that man when I first found out. That's not all. My daughter married her high school sweetheart, whom she did not discover until too late was an alcoholic. He was a respectable-looking accountant who first just slapped her around a bit, but when he finally really hit her, she left with our grandson, but only after he'd spent all the money she'd saved. Jason, here's why I stayed away from church. I know that, as a Christian, I should forgive these men, and that I should forgive myself too. But I can't. And believe me, it's not because I haven't tried. Maybe it's not fair to you, but I felt like every time I came to church, I wasn't being told what God had done for me in Jesus. I was being told instead what I needed to do for God. To do what I already can't find the strength to do, namely forgive them. Church just somehow became another place in my life where I felt like a failure. Though you seem like a nice person, you were only another man in my life who was devouring the parts of me that remained. She ended her note with a postscript. I'll be back and give it another try. But a word of advice, since you're a new preacher. I don't need to be reminded every Sunday of what I ought to do as a Christian. Believe me, knowing what we should do is not the problem for any of us. Every day, I need a reminder that God has met me in my failures. God has met me in my failure to forgive, and God forgives me. Well, that, dear friends, is the gospel of the King, of our King. It is not a word of law asking us to always do more, to be better, to work harder, to pretend we have it all together when we don't. His is a gospel of grace. He knows how you and I have failed, but these failures do not define us. His grace defines us. He knows the burdens you carry. He knows the sins and addictions that have imprisoned us. He has become our sin, crucified upon the cross, that in him we might be the righteousness of God. One of the criminals who was crucified alongside Jesus taunted him, "If you're the Messiah, save yourself and us." The other criminal told the truth about his failure, his desperate need for mercy. He no longer tried to be the king of his own life, in charge of it. He threw himself upon Christ's mercy, and mercy he found today said, "Jesus, you will be with me in paradise." A friend of mine likes to say, God's office is at the end of our rope. Oh, I thought that was funny. I guess you're not. Our King is not a merciless, constantly demanding ruler who requires us to achieve or pretend to a perfection we can never possess. Ours is not a religion of law, but of grace. Rejoice, dear ones, for God's grace is real, God's mercy is powerful, and God's forgiveness can take away our sin and our That is what this King enthroned upon the cross does for us.